Hey everybody, it is Dak here from the Ed Boys, and today's discussion video is going to be about lending and why we should be bringing it back. As you can already tell, I am a fan of the lending system, so I'll be mostly talking about why I would want the lending system in OSRS, but in this video, I will be discussing both the pros and the cons of potentially adding a lending system. First, let's go over what lending is. Very straightforward. You can already hand over your items to a friend or a potential trusted player, lending them the gear in the first place, but there's always the risk of not getting your gear back, right? Like, you're just trading and just like trusting them to give your stuff back. Instead, RS3 does have a system where you're guaranteed to get the item back. Oh no, not RS3. This isn't something that RS3 implemented, to be fair. Lending was added to Runescape in July of 2008. The OSRS servers are based on a version of the game from August of 2007. So lending was not even that new at all. Many of you have probably used the lending system before. When you trade an item, you had a choice to right-click and then loan instead of trading. You then could set amount of hours that you wanted to lend the item over, or you would just get it back when one of you two logged out, which honestly was a terrible option. You never wanted to use that. Any item that you currently are borrowing would have like this little symbol attached to it, making it untradeable so you couldn't sell it to anybody else. And then you could go out and use the item, and the person who lent it to you does not have to worry about getting it back or not. After the set amount of hours, it would just automatically go back to, I think it was like its own little kind of grand exchange section, the lending item. I don't think it automatically put it back in your bank, but it'll give the item back automatically after the set amount of hours or when you log out. Don't do that. Let's list off some of the pros for lending, the positives, the reason that we should add it to the game, and the most obvious one I've already brought up. This is a safe way to be able to lend a friend an item. For the most part, it should be safe to give your friends a good weapon and then get that weapon back in a couple of days. As we all know, it does not always happen that way, though. It's not every day that I hear friends scamming each other on OSRS, but I've heard plenty of stories of those quote-unquote friends that you gave anything from like a whip to a T-bow and then you never heard from them again. First of all, those people were not your friends and you are better off without them. But you're not better off without your T-bow, so I think it's reasonable to give us a safe method of lending and borrowing items. Some items in the game are extremely expensive. I'll bring it up a million times. The Twisted Bow, very simple example. You can use the Bow of Faradin up until you have T-bow life, but the Bofa is still like a 150 mil item. That's not cheap by any means. As of right now, if you wanted to try out some of these powerful weapons, maybe you've never gotten to like hemorrhage cash while you're using a scythe and you want to try that out, you have to find somebody who has it and then is willing to like risk lending it to you. Now, if we did have a legitimate lending system, it would be far easier to find somebody who's willing to lend you a T-bow or a scythe, likely because they would be advertising it at like the Grand Exchange or something, and likely for a price, which could be looked at as a negative, so we will talk about that in the cons section of the video too. Getting a few hours to try out a new weapon could do a couple of things for you. You might love the weapon, and it might motivate you even more to grind out one for yourself, or you might also realize that the price tag is really not worth it in your opinion, and you don't feel like you want to grind out that much cash for the weapon, and that could save you a lot of time. Like, you do not want to find out that you didn't really like the item that much after you went out and got like a bill for it. So that was more looking at the player who is borrowing an item. If you're the player who's lending out items for a price, this is a huge bonus to you. Being able to lend out items that you're not using adds some passive money making to your options. Is the rich get richer? Shake my head. That is how money works. Even if it's in-game money, when you have more of it, it's easier to make more. I don't think that this should be seen as a negative for those who don't have expensive items to lend, but rather more motivation to grind out those items. One of the best feelings in the game is grinding out cash to buy a big upgrade and finally having enough money to pull the trigger on that upgrade. Like reaching that milestone of cash to go buy it, that's like one of the best feelings in the game. Now, if we also had a lending system, you not only will achieve your goal of getting to buy this new item, go get to use the new powerful item, and then also while you're not using it, you could lend it to other people and get to make money off of your valuable item. I guess the way I see it is it just makes valuable items even more valuable, which makes it more fun to go grind those items out. One more point for the positives of a potential lending system is just traditional trading. I'm a big fan of the Grand Exchange, but this section of the video may not make me sound like it. A lot of us remember Falador Park when it was like the mass trading hub. It's very nostalgic, and it did have its perks at times compared to the GE. For one, when you're selling things in the GE, we now have that tax. To be fair, the tax has been doing a very good job at certain prices and whatnot, but it's still a tax. I'd rather go buy a large amount of items from the GE personally if I had to buy like 1,000 anglerfish because I needed some food. The Grand Exchange is way better than like finding somebody at the park who happens to have the stuff that I need. But the GE also has completely eliminated any interaction with buying and selling. As far as I remember, the lending system does not work through the GE. Maybe it does, or maybe they updated it, but I like the idea of only being able to lend through the trade screen. It would promote more player-to-player interaction overall, and then, I don't know, you can even bring back, like, haggling. There's no haggling with the GE. You can, like, you put an offer in the GE for a little bit less money than it normally would buy, and you just kind of wait it out is one thing. Like, no, I want actual haggling back. Now I'm going to switch gear and go over the cons, the negatives of a potential lending system. For the most part, it's just counterpoints to the things that I was just bringing up. First of all, the rich get richer. I already talked about like that motivation factor, which I do find to be a very big deal when you're trying to make a lot of money. I've now made a few series where I started completely from scratch trying to make a bunch of cash, and to continue making GP from absolutely nothing does require motivation at some point. That being said, the rich are still getting richer, yes. Just telling you that once you're rich, then you'll get richer doesn't change the fact that the people that are already rich are making more money. I just personally don't see the problem in that. What I do see a problem with is the poor getting poorer. I imagine most folks that are lending out their gear are going to want some good cash for it. If it's a really good weapon like a T-bow or a scythe, for instance, we keep bringing them up, but they're going to be expensive to borrow from somebody. Let's say you spent 1 mil to borrow somebody's T-bow for 1 hour, which is definitely too expensive. You need to rapidly now make over 1 mil in that hour to not lose money, and even if you made 2 mil in that hour, it's only 1 mil profit because you just spent a mil just to have the T-bow. The solution here is to either find a cheaper lend. Who knows what the prices are actually going to land on. I really feel like a mil an hour on borrowing any items is just going to stack up way too fast. But then also, you could just not borrow any items for money-making purposes. You should stick to borrowing the item to try it out. Maybe you want to just mess around with it, but constantly spending money on borrowing items to go out and then make money is not going to add up well. You shouldn't be borrowing items consistently, or you are going to get poorer. It's not going to add up for you. Realistically, if you're grinding out a lot of money, you're better off using the worst gear that you already own than you are spending a lot of money and borrowing expensive things just to speed up kills by a little bit. So there is a scenario here, if they add the lending system, that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Honestly, though, that balance really comes down to how the players decide to spend and charge the money. I don't think that is something that you can blame the lending system for. There is still the potential to get scammed while you're using the lending system. For one, if you know nothing of the item you're borrowing, you're just like, oh my god, everybody says that the scythe is sick, you can easily get tricked into overspending, right? You've never used a scythe before, you don't know anything about the difference in DPS, you see that the scythe is 500 mil, you don't have 500 mil, but you have 5 mil to spend, you find a nice guy that lends you the scythe for an hour for that 5 mil, holy crap, you get to use a scythe for an hour, one of the best weapons in the game. Totally not worth 5 mil for an hour though, and you may have no idea on that. So if that happens to you right there, that's, in my opinion, you just got scammed. Also, the way that you could get scammed from lending and borrowing items is if they use that until somebody logs out option. It's such an easy way to get scammed. I'm not 100% sure why it's even an option. If you give somebody some money and they immediately log out, goodbye item. You give somebody some money and then you disconnect, goodbye item. To be fair, it's not like that much of a con. If they were to give us a lending system and it had an option to lend until you logged out, if you don't want to get scammed from it, then just don't use it. It's like a minefield for getting scammed and you can avoid it. And let's not forget about the lost friendships we'll get from the lending system. What, you don't trust me with your T-bow? You just want to lend it, not actually trust trade it over? Some friend, bro. Anybody who gives you this act is more likely to have taken the item from you in the first place if they really want you to trust trade it that bad instead of lending. That on its own sounds like a scam. But I imagine that this interaction will happen a couple times if we get a lending system. I really don't see that as that much of a negative though. So clearly I am a fan of this potential lending system. Jagex developers have not even brought up that they are thinking about adding this necessarily. I haven't heard anything about it in recent news. I would love it if they did add it. Currently, I am a fan of it, but this is a discussion video, so we'll see what you guys have to say about it too. I personally think that it opens up the game in a few interesting ways without being like a huge update that messes with the meta of anything. I'm not blind to the potential downfalls that could come with it though, as I have tried to point out. As discussions go though, like I was saying, this video is just me talking about lending and the ideas that I have on it. You now have to continue the discussion below in the comments section to make it a real discussion video. Do you agree with some of the pros and cons that I bring up? Do you disagree with some of them? I don't really get to know until you comment. Also, I can't imagine that I've just hit like every single positive and negative point about lending in this short discussion video. So even if you have another angle to look at it, let me know in the comments section below. That is going to wrap up this discussion video though, everybody. I appreciate you all watching and interacting. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. I do stream on Twitch, which should be linked on the screen and in the description. I'm also on Twitter and have a Discord, which are linked in the description. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and best of luck on your grinds.